All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in another episode of Gaming on the Block. I'm your host, Mona, here with my co-hosts and great friends, TSG and Annie, and a very special guest. Look who is here. The one and only Kieran Warwick is on the show with us tonight. We're going to discuss gaming, NFTs, life. Anything can happen tonight, guys. Kieran, we're so excited you are here. Welcome on the block.
Thanks for having me, Mona. Cheers. It's good to be here again. I think this is my second time on the show, right?
First? You've been on my show. Right, We've done an alluvium.
Right. You have so many shows. It's hard to keep up.
I mean, the hustle is real out on these digital streets, I have to say. Too early in the morning for TSG, but look at him. He's looking fresh and handsome as ever. How's it going, mate?
Yo, it's good. It's good. We have something planned in August, so I know that I'm going to be the shortest person there, so I thought I needed a bit of a cleanup, and my wife is now telling me I look like a criminal, so I'll take that. I'll take the criminal look. Yeah.
I mean, now that you said it.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Now it's pretty.
Yeah, the glass on us. Yeah, we're not going to be able to unsee that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for it. How are you going, Annie?
I'm great, guys. It's been a few weeks since we last recorded, so pleasure to catch up again. I think a lot of us are bummed that we're missing 3XP. So last time, Mona and I were like in person together for NFT NYC. So back to being virtual, but it's good to catch up with you guys. Kieran, great to have you joining us officially for Gaming on the Block the first time.
Take us into the first topic. I think there's quite a bit to cover today.
We have some great topics. Annie's got some great topics for us. I think there's a few things we're going to hit on the gaming side. So Annie, why don't you take it away and give us the scoops on our first topic?
Yeah, so we want to talk about what is the value and the risk of trying to create something completely from scratch. So with Web3 gaming, we've got the chance to create entirely new potential worlds, interconnected games in ways that we've never have before. Or some projects are taking well-known classics and approaches and then reskinning them, creating new user loops with those kind of well-known genres. So today the first topic is full innovation, creating something brand new from scratch with Web3 gaming, or taking existing Web2 experiences and adding the elements of Web3, DAOs, tokens, user ownership. Which is better, which is riskier? And so for this, I think it's a great topic, Kieran. We're glad to have you on. You've got, I think, a mix of some of both within Alluvium. So as you think about titles that you grew up with, what has led you guys from the Alluvium side to pursue the path you have in terms of new titles and innovation versus taking known classics and applying them in a new way?
We've basically bolted on the best elements of Web3 to our favorite genres of gaming, right? Like, so the ability for verifiable ownership, the ability to bring one of your characters or your weapons or anything that you've generated in-game into another game, that interoperability, we have applied that to games that we grew up playing that was super fun. In terms of what is the more risky option, I think definitely creating a whole new genre, and there are a few games out there. I think even Ethlizards have invested in a couple of them. One that comes to mind is Gnaw, who are building something that I personally haven't seen, and I think adding the ability for those NFTs to be on chain. When you die inside the game, you lose that NFT forever. Like, something like that is a little bit out there, carries a little bit more risk, but at the same time, it's super innovative, and I think it's got the potential to be really big. I think that's a super cool concept. Whereas we took a more, I guess you would say, reserved approach in that we're not trying to change the world with brand new genres. We're just doing it in a way where it's more interconnected and it's a little bit more user-friendly for people to go through and explore the IP that we've built. But I think both can have a use case.
Don't you think, like, though, Kieran, because I look at storytelling as a business as well, right? Like I produce documentaries, and for every film that you want to create, you have to create a business for it. So it's kind of like your game, if you start from fresh, it's a startup, right? And there's so much more that goes into just starting from ground zero and building it up, as opposed to adding and making an existing game better. In this case, adding those decentralized elements to it. Do you look at it that way at all? Like, oh my, I have to start a whole new business if I start a whole new game?
We're 100% a startup, right? Like, even though there's multiple games that we're building inside of the Illuvium universe, we treat the starting of our company as brand new, right? Like, it's not a company, it's a fully decentralized autonomous organization that comes with its own challenges and risks, but we're certainly not working like a 10-year established company is, even though our valuation might look like that, right? Like we're 100% in startup mode. I think that is what leads to a higher rate of innovation and delivery of overall product, right? Like most studios in our position would, that going in and saying, we're going to build a new game will take 4 or 5 years. We're a brand new studio that has said, we're going to build 3 games, and we've gotten them to a point where all 3 are playable in less than 3 years. I think that comes from our scrappy nature and people working super long hours and really being passionate about what they're building, as opposed to just being another cog in this massive machine that is churning out games and has done so for 10, 15 years.
One element, Kieran, that I think we see in the sector is you want to make experiences that are easily accessible for gamers. And that's everything from the onboarding process into your world to combinations of the lore, the gameplay loops and mechanics. I think a big point in favor of taking a genre that people are already familiar with and applying it in a new way, where maybe the only element of uncertainty or additional complexity to users is the Web3 structure, right? With tokens or NFTs, that makes it a lot more accessible to players, whereas more difficult for someone to understand an entire construct like Noor, for instance, since you mentioned that. So I think this is a point in favor of projects that are building, on top of more established structures.
Yeah, and that's games have attracted billions of players across the world, right? And from a perspective of gunning for success, if you're a developer that's just starting off, I think it's a lot easier to take a concept which already exists, which you already have tens of millions of players playing around the world and have been doing so for decades, and then just bolting on those really cool elements that it might seem a little bit complex when you first are introduced to the idea of an NFT, and that NFT can be used in multiple different games, and you have ownership of that, and it means you can go and sell it for real world money. Like, that whole concept might take a little bit to process, but I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that it just hasn't been fully introduced yet. Like, we've had a few examples with Axie and a couple of other titles over the past 2 or 3 years, but we don't have a game that's got 10, 15, 20 million players, right? And once you get that many players, the network effect of other people telling their friends, hey, I really want you to play this game, it's the same as a Fortnite, that we sit there and we play 5 to 10 hours a day as friends online, except you can actually own your skins. And then they can, when they stop selling those skins, in a year's time, we might be able to sell one, and you get that effect of someone going out and telling, multiple other people, this is super powerful. This whole concept is actually not that crazy. It just is the same thing we're used to, except it allows us to capitalize on being early and investing in things that potentially have rarity. And so I just think we haven't hit that inflection point yet. I think we got close, but the games weren't good enough quality for people to really say, hey, NFTs are a compelling use case inside of this billion-dollar industry. When we do hit that, it's going to be like most new technologies where there's a learning curve, but it's not that crazy, right? Like to get your head around how powerful this will be. And yeah, I think that games like Illuvium, obviously I'm heavily biased, but it's games like us where we're building something. It is similar to your experience in Pokemon. It is similar to like a Sim City or a Clash of Clans that they're already very, very used to this. It's just adding a few better elements to it and then seeing the virality of that once it's in place.
Well, TSG has those Pokemons behind them, and it made me think, because Annie, I almost want to say it depends who you're asking the question to. If you're asking Pokemon coming into Web3, what would their strategy be? I'm sure because of the player base that they already have, they would prefer to just add those Web3 elements to a game that they already have in Web2, right? As opposed to relaunching an entire Web3 game from scratch.
For Pokemon, for example, it really depends on just what they're thinking about, because it could go one of two ways. One, they could say, yes, let's leverage the Pokemon brand and utilize that to go into Web3. Or they could take the other side, which is we don't want to tarnish the Pokemon brand and take a risk with it. So it's hard to say what they're going to do with traditional media, traditional legacy companies like that. One thing that we need to understand is, Kieran made a good point, and it's how do consumers behave? They like something that's familiar. We can't just throw new shit on new shit on new shit on them and expect them to say, oh, we're all about it. That's just not what consumers like. That even like today, we kind of saw the reveal of the Apple Vision. Is that what it's called? I don't even know what it's called.
Yep. Apple Vision.
Yeah. So the ski
Yeah.
goggle, they're trying to put on this new technology, but they've designed it in a way that's digestible for consumers. Oh, they relate it to ski goggles. I've worn this in my life before. I've done it before. It's not outlandish with a fucking big ass box in front of them with cables and shit. It looks like something that they've worn before. So understanding that that's how consumers think, that they need that familiar thing. I think creating something completely brand new in Web3, as Kieran said, is risky. There's a chance for it, but it is risky. What we want to try and do is try and find that fine line of what is familiar. And the problem is it can't just be a copy paste. Like if it's a copy paste of what someone's done before, that's also going to fail because it's like, what the fuck? Like, what's the purpose of this? You need to find that narrow line of familiarity, I think that's the word, and innovation. And that's where I think we're going to see the greats kind of stand out. And that's why I think Illuvium is doing really well with that. I'm not saying it's not risky. It's still always going to be a risk with any startup. Thread that needle right there is where you're going to see that the names really kind of shoot out of the stratosphere and make a name for themselves. But you can't lean too heavily on either side. That's kind of where I stand on that.
I think they won't have a choice, right? Like if games like Illuvium are successful, I think it'll be a situation where they start dipping their toe into the water, right? Where they'll come up with a new Pokemon game that might just be exclusive to desktop. They'll see what it's like. But my thoughts over the last 3 years, and this is being a Pokemon fan, if you gave me the opportunity to capture these in-game characters and own them, and then had a marketplace that lasted in perpetuity, right? Where you have multiple versions, where the game of Pokemon might end, like Sword and Shield, then there's a new game and a new game and a new game, and those Pokemon that you caught out of that game that might be 3-4 years old, you can still sell on this global marketplace that includes all of the IP of any of these future games that are connected to Web3 inside of the Pokemon universe. I don't think I'm going back to the old games where I can't do that. Like that user experience is so much more powerful, having ownership of your assets. It just seems farcical to think that people are going to go, actually, I don't want to do that anymore. Like you guys can keep it server owned and my assets being owned by me is actually not that attractive. It just, I don't know. I think that's a little bit silly to think that people will go back to that. So that's just where I'm at.
I think the key element here, Kieran, that makes this possible is in the past, gaming studios were so locked in on how are we going to monetize the new title? Because if you can use those assets that we sold you in Sword and Shield, that's a great example. Well, you're not going to be out there needing to buy the assets in the new title that we're launching because, well, you can just carry those forward. The element that makes it different is having royalties on a collection. Because now, not only do I get as a game development studio to sell the assets the first time, or however you're going to earn or win the assets, but I have that on the front end. I now have a perpetual cycle where I get secondary sales every time Kieran, you sell to TSG, who then sells to Mona, who then sells to me. Now I can be having this continual loop. And that's why I've said that royalties, I believe, for gaming studios are the secret sauce for this perpetual economic machine that doesn't require you to be like, FIFA or NFL and put out the same crap titles every year and just changing the numbers a little bit within the game. Now you can have the assets that people actually liked and they were connected to. They don't have to lose those, but you can still maintain the value of that collection because you're getting continual revenue streams on the back end.
100%.
As you guys are talking, I'm thinking, recently when I went to Metaverse Fashion Week, I went to these pop-ups that, let's say, Fendi had and Nike had, and you're absolutely right, TSG. What they are doing is they're maintaining that familiarity. I can't even say.
It's a weird word.
It's a weird name. Why can't I say it? So you say it. I can't even say it now.
Similarity. How's that?
Familiarity.
Thank you. Yes, that. Because everybody loves Jordans, right? Like everyone relates to that. But what they're doing is they're creating these exclusivities, right? That is only exclusive to the metaverse. So if you come in and you participate in our scavenger hunts in Decentraland, and what they're also doing, they're doing discrete advertising. So they're really advertising without you knowing it by having you engage, right? And making it an immersive experience. So they're still having you go hunt for that Jordan, but it's also Web3 elements that are attached to it. Hey, if you buy the NFT, once you find it and you buy this NFT, we'll send you the physical to your home too, right? I see that same thing with gaming too. So you're keeping that thing that people love, that story, that gameplay that people love, but you're adding those Web3 elements to it. That's kind of how I see it. So maybe you want to call that a hybrid. I don't know, but that's the direction I see it.
Yeah, that's why I say it needs to be that thin line there. And actually, Annie, talking about royalties, the thing is, I don't know if traditional companies are just afraid to jump into this space because of all the, like, just the stuff that we see. It is kind of murky. What is in the industry? It is what it is. But again, with the royalties, we're already seeing that with Ethlizards. And what trips me out is we're seeing the trading, the secondary market, like, in action. And what's crazy is Wave 1 just ended. So what happens when we're in Wave 3 and the secondary market, you can still trade Wave 1 assets? Like, that's where the fun's really going to start, right? And that's for a collectible game. That's just for a collection. What happens when we're talking about, like, an actual playable game, like Illuvium Overworld Arena, or like what we're saying, Pokemon? What if in Sword and Shield you got a specific Pokemon, and then I don't even know what the new ones are, but in that region you can't get it. You can still play the old assets, but you can only purchase them through the secondary marketplace at that point. Wouldn't that be exciting? Isn't that a great source of perpetual royalties for a company like that? And it trips me out. I don't know if they're unaware of this. I'm sure if I figured it out, they have as well. I think there's just something making them kind of hesitant to pull the trigger into jumping into that space. But for a business move, I think it makes complete sense. And if they do it right, and they're not kind of doing the Facebook route of 50% royalties, as long as they're not doing that and they're treating their consumers well, I think that it's a great business move, and it's going to be a lot more revenue in the long run rather than I buy a game, buy DLC, that's the end of the revenue, loop right there. It's just done.
That's right. I think the question that I have, and Kieran, I'm sure you guys have given some thought to this too. In Web3, we always want to incentivize people to be early. Like that's sort of the name of the game, because I think a lot of this comes from the idea that if you discover great investment on the front end, you're going to have more of an opportunity on the back end. I think we have to be a little careful, though, as an industry, that we have to manage how we apply that to our gamers. And I'm going to draw the example to like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or Clash of Clans. There's always a catch-up mechanic in these titles that allows you, if you are a new player, you never want to come in and feel like I'm too far behind someone who's been playing for a year or two. Obviously, you're not expecting to come in on day one and have the same power level or whatever as someone that's been playing for 2 years, but you never want to feel like it's out of reach. And so I think this is a key question that projects are going to have to grapple with, is how do we add catch-up mechanics in a way that isn't, well, the only way is to go out to the marketplace and buy something for $500 from someone that was here early. And I think you guys have a good approach on this with Illuvium, with having just new waves and new sets of Illuvials that are going to come out. But I think it's not going to be that easy for every title to find a similar approach. What are your thoughts on this challenge?
You can't have people advancing to a point where year 2 and people are avoiding it because they know that regardless of how much they play, they're just too far behind. They're never going to be able to catch up. Our approach in Illuvium is to continually refresh the assets, right? But that doesn't mean making more powerful assets, better assets. They're not going to allow you to win the game any more easy than if you had started at the start of the next set, right? Like now, to a certain point, you got to balance it, right? Like if someone has spent the time to grind and get a whole bunch of, in our case, tier 5, stage 3 assets, and they're going into arena modes and they're winning competitions, that's not because they were early, it's because they've spent the time to grind, right? Which you can't avoid. You can't just say, hey, I want to play this game for an hour and then I want to be, already, top tier and ranked in diamond. That's just not, you've got to spend the time. But I think the important thing is, yes, we go through set refreshes, and that's ideally going to be every 12 months or so. But starting in set 2, you're still going to be able to capture things that allow you to be as good as anyone who started in set 1. What you can't get, and what I think is a good element to keep in there, is if you find a character to be super cool or have a really good abilities or synergies that you think is like, wow, like that really speaks to me on a personal level. Like let's take Squiz, for example, right? Like one of our most popular characters, you might look at that and be like, I really love everything that he's about. He shocks people. He's got this awesome Omega. It's so popular. It's like being able to get Pikachu, but that original Pikachu was only available in the first Pokemon game, right? Like you might get a different version of Squiz in set 2, maybe it has different abilities, but if you want that OG status to be like, I had the first Pikachu and you guys don't have that, no, it's not going to play better in the arena. It's not going to, it doesn't give you an advantage, but it's like having a super rare skin. It's like,
collectible.
I was here for, it's a collectible where it's like, that guy has been in the game for 3, 4, 5 years. There's something about that in the gaming world. When you've got digital collectibles, it's like, damn it, I really wish I had that. And that's when these marketplaces come into play. And that's how you keep these assets valuable over time, is because there should be enough people that come into the ecosystem that are like, well, I don't want to play with this exalted Squiz. I just want to play with the OG Squiz, right? Like that just everyone knows that character was one of the first characters that was ever caught in Illuvium. And that means something to me. And that's the approach that we've taken. And I think that's a good balance between still keeping assets valuable over time and not just minting the same thing over and over and over again until they literally have no value, but also not saying that, because you were here in the first year and I'm joining in the third year, you're going to be better than me at Illuvium and you have an advantage, because that doesn't work either.
I think a good way to balance that, Kieran, is like what you have said, and I think Aaron might have said this as well previously in an AMA or something. It's like right now we have Ramfire. Instead of I'm not saying instead, but like rather than completely introducing brand new characters all the time, have a bit of a balance between brand new characters, and then instead of Ramfire, maybe bring in a Ram Frost or a Ram Shock, right? So it's the same kind of character, same kind of build, but with a different thing. So the power levels are still relatively the same, but it's how do you use it? And again, like what Kieran's saying, if you still want that OG Ramfire, you still need to get that Ramfire. If you don't care about that, you can get the Ram Frost, Ram Shock, Ram Leaf. I don't know. I'm just making shit up now. But yeah, you get the idea. And I think that's a very simple way to keep things balanced, but keep things fresh as well. And obviously, you don't want to make all the brand new characters just refreshes. You want to find that balance of, again, what I kind of said previously of you want that new stuff with that sense of familiarity. I don't know why I keep torturing myself saying that word, but you want to kind of find that balance there.
You and me both.
So I think that's a really smart strategy, even for new sets. And you see that with Pokemon. Again, we keep going back to Pokemon, and no matter what we say about the games, which is shit these days, I think they've really kind of smashed the fucking strategy of what they do. They have new region versions of their Diglets and shit, whether a Alolan Diglett or whatever it is like super long, or fucking Pikachu's on a surfboard somewhere. Like they use the same characters, different skins and shit. Doesn't mean they're super powerful. It just means that they look different. I think that's a really, really smart strategy there.
The only thing I'll say to that is you guys are absolutely right too. And if you think about it, people get addicted and so emotional about their characters that they love, whether it's in a film, whether it's in a game, whether it's in, I was given an example of Nikes. Like people are so emotional about the things that they love, right? And then there's a FOMO attached to it that everybody has to have it and they want it. I mean, down to you're watching, I think it was a US Open in the metaverse where you could actually own the ball that Serena Williams was hitting, right? And people get all so emotional about a ball.
It's a collectible, right? The psychology of collecting is fascinating. Like it's insane. Like even people who say, "Oh, I don't care about collecting like the digital stuff and whatever," I find I really start digging in, and I'm like, "Oh, it's weird. You have like 65 wrenches down there. Do you need that many of the exact same tool that has the exact same application? Or do you just really love collecting wrenches, Dad?" And he's like, "Well, I mean,
that's a pretty specific example."
I'm just saying, like, it doesn't matter what it is, stamps, physical stuff, like shoes. Like at one point I got addicted to like you're saying, like Nikes, Adidas, like running shoes. And all of a sudden I had like 50 pairs of shoes in my house, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And it's just it's crazy.
Only a few
grapples you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
You thought only us women had the issue. You see, it's just as bad with you guys.
No, not with us guys. I don't take that with Kieran. It's the same with Kieran, not us guys.
Thankfully, there are some things which, but I mean, yeah, that raises another point. It's like, what is meaningful to you, right? Like some people collect cars and they have a super high value. Some people collect stamps. Some people collect things that are digital where other people are like, but you can't even touch it. But it doesn't matter. It's what it boils down to what is important to that individual. And it can be the craziest of attributes that get people addicted to collecting, but it is a real thing. And I think it's super, super powerful. And obviously, we've seen it with skins in game where people theoretically don't even own them, right? Like it's sitting in your account, essentially owned. And that's why I think, and that's why, 3 years ago now, I saw that and I was like, this is going to be absolutely astronomical for the gaming industry. And that has not changed, not once.
And imagine, too, we're talking about this as individuals who, in general, maybe TSG, you're the exception. We grew up, the virtual worlds that we were engaged in were not all consuming, right? We grew up in a time period where we had technology evolving and we began to move into more of a virtual space over the course of our lifetimes. When I look at my kids and folks their age, they've never experienced a world in which they are going to spend more time physically with another human being than in a virtual environment with that same best friend. And so the idea that people will not favor virtual collectibles, where if I go and see my friend's virtual house or their room or whatever their page is, I'm going to see that 100 times more often than I'm going to see their actual physical place where they're living. And so why would I not place more value on that virtual object that people can experience than a painting that I can put in my living room that not a single person is ever going to see? Like, I mean, I'm going to see it every day, but if I care about what my community or friends think, like, they're going to experience it more virtually than they ever will in the real world.
Yeah, this is all for Gen Z too, though, by the way. I always say what we're building today is for the generation that's coming behind us for the most part.
I just wanted to clear it up. I am 30. I spent the majority of my childhood touching grass. I am not.
TSG, do you know what a pager is? What is a pager?
My dad had one. I 100%. I grew up with this shit. 100%.
Just checking.
Very good. So speaking of technology as it evolves, one of the big questions that we have for the panel today is there anything that we're actually building in Web3 that literally cannot be done with Web2 tech? I see this question a lot, and what is it about Web3 that actually is necessary to make these solutions possible? Because couldn't we just say, well, I mean, in Blizzard's case, they did with Diablo over a decade ago, you can just sell your items for real world money. They had the real world auction house. We know it's possible in Web2. You could just set up a Shopify storefront if you wanted as a studio and let people transact on those objects. So what is it about Web3 tech that really matters and is different, that requires it versus Web2? So I'll open that up, Kieran, to you first, as I know you guys have some pretty interesting takes here with Illuvium.
Yeah, I think interoperability, that's the key unlock for me. Like the ability to have something inside of a game that you played years before that you can bring into a new game and start utilizing that. And whether or not that is the same character or that's like a ticket that unlocks a new character that's like a new version of it or whatever it might be. But the ability to tokenize something and allow it to digitally unlock something in a new game or something in an existing universe, just in a different type of game. Like in our case, your ability to play in the overworld and capture things and then take that into the arena. And then if we were to go ahead and build like a dungeon crawler, you can take your characters that can go down there and all of a sudden you're starting to like capture loot and it might be multiplayer and you've got other people that are bringing those characters in. That's a huge unlock in my opinion. And there's so many examples of games where I've stayed within the IP, as in like I love the IP and I've continued to play game after game after game, but you've got to start again. And I think to myself, like, how cool would it be if you could use that old OG character? Obviously, there are a lot of challenges that come with that in things like balancing. Like if the game is newer and you've got things like, new abilities, new power ratings that you want to add to the game to make it a little bit more engaging for these players of this same IP, you need to work on balancing, right? To be able to port in that character. And that's why I'm saying it doesn't even need to be the exact same character. It can be a character that gets upscaled or whatever it might be, but it's giving that person who was there backing the IP from the beginning something that they know will work in perpetuity throughout that IP. Like, take, for example, I remember playing like Street Fighter, some of the early versions. And there was versions of like, there's many of the characters that you can't play in the new games now where they've just taken them out. It would be amazing to be able to bring them back. And yes, every like 5 years, they sometimes bring a character back that you haven't been able to play. But to be able to say like, yeah, I had this character, I beat the game, and so you earned this NFT, which gave me like a Blanca, for example. And then you could bring that into the newest Street Fighter, and kids these days are like, whoa, what? I haven't even seen that character. Like, what is this big green ball of energy that's coming at me? Like, this is not real. Like, maybe he's not any better and you still need the same skill level, and that is critical here. But I think that would be so much more exciting for people that play these IPs and have done so for, decades and decades now. That's the unlock for me, that interoperability. Not so much the marketplaces, because as you said, they've been done before.
So, Kieran, I want to ask about balance, because you mentioned this, and I do think that's the biggest challenge here. I look at Web 2 titles that go through major rebalancing acts, and they may nerf a bunch of characters or buff a bunch of others. I'm going to use an example: Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes in 2021. They had a major nerf. So this was more than 5 years after the game launched. You had people that had constructed very carefully and intricately teams that could counter other teams within the meta, and so you would be playing multiple matches. I think it's similar in a lot of ways to what we'll see with the arena in Illuvium. And some of the abilities that they had given characters were just such that they did not scale. Not that they were too weak, but that they were too strong. And as you had sort of the eventual power creep of characters over time, they eventually realized as a studio, we have to completely break this mechanic and change it to something that now becomes devalued more over time. It created a huge, huge issue. Lots of players dropped out. Players that had spent literally thousands of dollars. They didn't even own their own assets. So hello in terms of viability of the business case for this type of product. But how do you approach that as a studio, making sure that, forget people that are speculating on the future value of assets, but if we say, all right, I've got this squiz that I want for this team over here, and now all of a sudden he has to get nerfed because there's an interplay with another character that you're introducing. What do you tell to a gamer, who's experiencing that?
So I think that's where community governance comes into play, right? Like that's where you need to, and we've just, as you know, recently moved to a model where we now have our governance V2 structure that has a gaming council that's made up of the best minds in our community that understand game balance. And that's also fed into directly from the community, who are likely the people that are playing these games. And so I think it will end up being a structure like a governance V3 structure that has this ability for the gaming council to propose something and then have the entire community of holders. And this is where I think it gets a little bit more intricate than just token holders, because I don't think token holders can actually represent the player base as a whole. I think you need to add in a system that includes NFT holders, right, across the board. So like if you hold this character, then you can have a vote on it. If you hold a different character, then that also has a weighting in your vote. And so you're getting the entire game to vote on whether a character gets nerfed or not. And you use a whole bunch of simulations to say, okay, we've worked this out based on AI to say it is very, very likely based on the 10 million arena games that we just played, this character is too powerful now. So we can either do one of two things. We can remove confliction that we have where we introduce a new character and they just don't match. And how that plays out, I don't know, because you've got people who already own those NFTs. I think that's a major challenge there. Or you can say, we've introduced these characters, but however it happened, it got voted in, the gaming council consulted on it, you guys voted them in, and so we agreed on introducing this character, but now we have a challenge here where they're just way too OP. We need to nerf them. We're now going to put that to the entire community to say, do you want this nerf to go ahead? If it's a major nerf, again, do you want this to go ahead? And I think we need to build this governance V3 structure and system. And I think it's going to take a lot of tech to be able to do it as well, to work out whether or not on an individual basis we go through with a nerf, or if it's done on a global basis of all characters to say, based on the simulation that we've run millions and millions of times, we're using AI, we've worked this out to be, we need to nerf Ramfire by 6% and we need to increase defense Atlas by 11%, whatever that might be. And that might be an iterative process where you're constantly doing this once a week. And so it's not like a major nerf every 5 years. It's like a weekly thing. There's a lot of challenges there, but the main point that I want to make there is that it will be up to the player base. I think that's the major difference. Where I feel games go wrong is they'll come out with the studio will come out with these nerfs without really taking on much feedback from the players, and then all of a sudden it's like take it or leave it, right? Like you don't have a choice. We don't care if you bought a whole bunch of in-game assets and stuff like that. This is the way that it is. That doesn't feel as good as, well, I mean, I voted that my character didn't get nerfed, but 90% of people voted that it should. Probably fair that it gets nerfed, you know? I think that's a better, more palatable situation than just 10 bigwigs inside a company saying this is what we're doing and tough luck if you don't like it.
Annie, to your initial question of can we do all of this in Web3, I mean, what Kieran is explaining are elements that we talked about of Web3, right? Since you guys are covering gaming, I'll give a big picture perspective. I remember Chris Dixon of A16Z. I watched him on stage, and he explained Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, and he said Web 1 was read, right? Web 2 was read, write, and Web 3 is read, write, own. Right? So this premise of Web 3 is ownership. So can we do ownership in Web 2? Sure, but then it needs to be called Web 2.5. or whatever you want to call it. But I think there are these elements that Web3 is offering, whether it's ownership and control of virtual assets, or offering players these player-driven economies, or democratizing, right, content. They're just these elements that you guys are referring to, Kieran is referring to, that really shape what Web3 is. Could you do all of this in Web 2? Sure, you can, but do we still want to call it Web 2? You know what I mean? But I think what really differentiates Web 3 from Web 2 is the ownership and being able to give back control to the players, to the content creators, and that's what sets it apart.
Yeah, and I think the key element here that you hit on, Mona, is the trustless and verifiable elements of ownership, right? You can say, if I'm Blizzard or I'm Ubisoft, okay, Annie owns this particular asset in a game because it's on my account, right? It's in their server on my account. They can establish for their own knowledge and confidence that I'm the owner of that asset, and therefore they can give me a button that says I should be able to trade this thing, or I should be able to, to prove ownership, even for like DAO voting. The problem comes in with trust, where communities are pretty untrusting of large tech organizations and especially gaming organizations, where it's been pretty well established there's not a lot of confidence from player bases in many of these development studios to do the right thing, and especially when it comes to monetization. So I think in this case, being able to be an individual who can see on the blockchain, okay, these are all of the assets, and this is linked to that wallet, and I know that no one is faking this because it's all visible and it's immutably written in code right in front of me. I think that's a key element that you're hitting on here that makes it different in Web 3 versus Web 2.
Which you just did too. So it's Kieran's interoperability, Mona's ownership, Annie's transparency and trust. TSG, go! Give us an element of Web3 that's a game changer.
Yeah, I think it's legitimately what Kieran kind of mentioned before. Because, all of the ownership stuff, the trustlessness, I get all of that. But I think it's giving a voice to the players. Or if we're talking about gaming specifically, giving a voice to those where they haven't had a voice in the communities that they've been in before. The way I look at all of these games, whether it's a DeFi protocol, whether it's a game, I look at them as, like, we live in this digital world now, and I look at them as countries. And I know Raul Paul mentioned a similar thing, where these communities are now self-sustaining countries, essentially. And you want to have a say in the direction that you go in. If, for example, you see it with the cuff situation in America, for example, a lot of people left LA because they wanted to go to Florida because of the different restrictions, right? And I think we should allow people to have that. But for a lot of people in the real world, if they don't like the country that they're in, they can't just move. They don't have that option. Digitally, and I'm not saying you can move digital like in real life, but if there's a game, for example, if there's a game, for example, that starts making decisions that you don't like, you can get out of it. You can get out and go to somewhere else where there's still an economy going on. Like if people are about it, and you can go be with the people that you essentially fuck with and resonate with your thought process and values. I have these conversations that I can't change in the way I speak, Kieran. It feels more natural for me to say it like that. I think that's the biggest thing, right? So being able to find that group of people, that community that believes in the stuff that you believe in, and being able to add value into that, you can actually be a part of constructing that community that you want to be a part of. And I think that's super, super exciting. We've seen that with like celebrities and influencers in Web2 already, but we haven't seen that yet for gaming and other kind of experiences like that, which is what I think Web3 brings into gaming specifically, which is what I'm really excited for. Because you see it with World of Warcraft, you see it with Diablo. There's so many of these games that people have their opinions and they just like not listen to, and then they just leave. And again, I can go into an example about Smash, but I'm not going to. But yeah, there's just so many examples of this. I think the biggest benefit to gamers for sure.
But we really, really just hit all the Web3 characteristics, by the way. Interoperability, community, ownership, transparency. What?
I'm going to throw a fifth and then also one observation on this too. So the fifth one is this alignment, right? We talk about like shareholder alignment. I think that can be greatly improved in Web3 as well, where this has elements in the community and interoperability, governance structures. That's a big improvement. But I also want to note one item that we haven't even touched on. And I think if you were to ask the average person on the street that had only a surface level knowledge of Web3, what elements would matter, they would talk first about token price appreciation. That would be where they would start and probably end the conversation. And for all of us, it wasn't even in the top 5 items that we wanted to mention here.
I disagree. What? No way. Nobody wants, you say tokens on the street, people are going to run. They're like, oh, don't even talk about crypto to me. Are you?
That's all they know. That's all they know. Like that's
exactly. I think that's the key. Is that's the impression for the average person. Is this is what Web3 and crypto means in any industry, and they assume that's the same thing for gaming too. And so I think that was an interesting observation. None of us even talked about a token at all in that dialogue whatsoever. So with that said, we're going to jump to now the last item for today, which is a new segment that we're introducing called our hot take segment. So Kieran, we're going to put you on the spot first, but we'll go through the the group afterwards. The question in front of us today is: give us your best hot take. Which is most likely to kickstart the next Web3 bull run cycle? Meme coins or the next Web3 gaming title hit?
Without a doubt, meme coins. I think they're way too...
You mean Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic 10, Inu is not going to put us into a... That's not going to be the reason?
No, so I think the whole pump and dumps, the get rich quick little schemes that people create, they probably do more harm than good. You know, someone needs to, and it's usually influencers that get into those meme coins first, and the retail investors follow on in the hope that it's going to turn into the next Pepe. There's been one Pepe, maybe you could say Mong. I think that's even gone to like 99% down, not to zero, but it's like 99% down or whatever it is. I don't think that's good for sustainability inside of crypto. I definitely don't think that's going to kickstart the next bull run. I mean, Pepe happened, and what was that, 3 months ago now, and I don't think we're in a bull run. So I think that's proven. Now, arguably, it was DeFi and yield farming that kicked off the bull run of 2021. A lot of people do say that gaming was a proponent of the bull run with what happened with Axie and whatever, but I think we were already in the starting stages of that bull run. So in my opinion, gaming hasn't been that catalyst yet, which is insane to me, right? But then you look at it and you think, okay, well, how many games are actually playable? How many of these games actually have a marketplace? How many of these games have that ability for token appreciation when they're not playable yet? Not many. But when games like us and the multiple other ones that are going to launch sometime next year start coming out and we start siphoning off players from Web 2, I think it's inevitable that we are going to see another bull run, purely because the total addressable market in gaming is just astronomical. And when it comes to complexity of trying to teach someone to move their money across from traditional banking to decentralized banking, it's a lot harder to explain that to someone, to explain wallets, to explain like how to stake and all of these things that come with the elements of DeFi. Whereas when you're talking about getting someone to jump across from a traditional game to a crypto game, as long as it's as good in quality and the onboarding process is seamless, which I think we are going to achieve in the next 6 months, it's very easy to say, hey, put down that game, play this game. It's more fun, and there's cool elements like we just mentioned with Web3. I just can't see it not being the catalyst. So that's my opinion on that. That's my hot take.
It's a hot take that everyone agrees with.
TSG, you don't agree?
No, of course, man. It makes complete sense. Like the whole meme coin thing, it's a fucking casino. Let's call it what it is. It's a casino. Is that really going to be the reason that my mom gets interested? I mean, gaming's probably not going to be the reason either. But is that going to be the reason that a bunch of fucking high schoolers are going to come in? Maybe it's to get rich, but they're going to come in and out. It's a casino. You go in for a night, you come out. Like, that's it. But gaming is actually going to be, if I'm given the choice, to be honest, I can't see any other reason, any other catalyst outside of gaming currently. We had DeFi Summer. That was a thing already. And we kind of understand the purpose and the tools of DeFi, and it's all great. Is that going to incentivize a bunch of new people to come back in? I don't think so. I think that next level up now is gaming, where, again, it's a recession, guys. Wait, did Hogwarts Legacy do incredibly well? Oh, wait, yes, it did. Did Star Wars Jedi Survivor do really well? Oh, wait, yes, it did. Did fucking Diablo 4 do really well? Yes, it did. But I thought we were in a recession. I thought we weren't spending money like that. So if people are going crazy about games as is, it doesn't matter what kind of market we're in. The moment we have good games out, and what Kieran is saying, like, again, there's 3 billion players. If we can start to siphon a couple of them in, like, over time, it's going to be gaming. Gaming is the gateway to everything else. So it makes complete sense. And yeah, I think 2024, 2025 is when we start to see, and I think, yeah, look, I'm not going to make any financial claims of what the macro economy is going to be looking like, but fingers crossed it's going to be looking better than it is now. And so with that, as well as the good games that what Kieran is saying is going to start coming out in the next 2 years, I think we're going to start to see them trickle out into the market. I think that's going to be a fun time. The next couple of years is where we really start to see real good mass adoption kind of use case for crypto. Right now, it's about trading. It's about store of value. That's all good. It doesn't appeal to most people. I think gaming does, or at least half the population. So anyone that says meme coin, I don't know how that choosing gaming is a hot take. Definitely not Harry Potter, Sonic, Inu, or whatever the fuck that
was. Annie, what do you think? Lizard's going to start the next bull run or what?
Hey, Lizards have been here from the beginning, and so there's absolutely no telling when they're going to turn around the next evolution on planet Earth and across the universe. I think Kieran has a really good take here, and the point around DeFi protocols being sort of the catalyst for 2021. If you look at it, the foundations of those sustainable DeFi protocols were built 3 and 4 years beforehand in the previous bull runs, right? And so they led to rampant speculation, which I agree was not good at the time for the market. But what happened is over time, those valuations moved, cratered, and they came back down to something more meaningful. And the products and the services and the protocols that actually had value stuck around for the next 3 and 4 years. And they're the ones that actually moved into the 2021, 2022 time period and showed that they had longevity. And I think we're going to see the same thing with Web3 gaming, where, yes, we saw a lot of speculation in 2021. all of those projects, I mean, maybe not all, but in general, they were not sustainable at the levels that they were at. However, those that are actually building meaningful, valuable products, they're here still continuing to build. We see them every day. I talk to these founders and devs that are continuing to crank out good code, good design, good artwork. And in the next 2 or 3 years, the fruits of that are going to become transparent. And it's going to look like Web3 gaming took the world by storm out of nowhere. But that was built over these past 4 or 5 years when everyone was out here grinding away in the industry. So I agree. I think that's going to be what kicks us off as far as the next wave of attention coming into the sector.
Yeah, and you guys pretty much covered it. I mean, Web3 gaming has tremendous potential here. It's driving adoption, innovation. There's a ton of unique experiences, ownership opportunities, earning opportunities. DeFi, I'm worried for DeFi. DeFi is going to have a hard time. Self-custody is a great idea. I wish everyone could self-custody, but if everyone could self-custody, our world would be in a much better place. There's going to be a lot of hand-holding with self-custody that will be required. Banks, just to ask people to replace banks with self-custody is a huge ask. And then we have regulations. I mean, today, I think SEC is declaring SAND and ADA as securities. So here, I think DeFi is just going to have a huge, roadblock that we'll have to mitigate. So, but hey, gaming is looking pretty fun and exciting, and there's opportunities, and I'm going gaming. That's where I'm going. Speaking of that, we can't let Kieran go today without asking him if there are any alphas he wants to share with us in gaming, since it's way more exciting and fun over here. Kieran, anything people need to know before we go?
So one thing that I've been focused on for the past few months has been the Illuvium capital raise. We've wanted to really ensure that we have enough runway post our launch, and I think it's going to be super successful, and I think the way that our tokenomics work, it's not going to be an issue at all, but it's good to have a safety net there, and I think that's really, really positive as a whole. But what that now allows me to do is to move into helping Annie close out the capital raise with the Ethlizards, which has been something that we've wanted to do for, I would say, nearly 6 months now. And I'm not too worried about about us being able to raise that initial pre-seed round. What I'm really, really excited about is that we're starting to come together with Battle in the Beyond, which is going to be the first title that Ethlizards released. I'm excited because I'm a big Illuvium Beyond player myself. I love opening discs. I say I'm done, I'm not going to open anymore, and then I end up going and buying like 200, 300 more. And I just think having the ability to take people on, like we've done battles. I think everyone on this call has been a part of battles, and it's a super amount of fun. But then having things like rewards built into it, and then eventually tournaments and stuff like that. We've got the designs pretty much done. We're in the process of bringing on a couple of devs to start building it out, and hopefully by the end of Wave 2, we'll have some kind of concept out there. We'll be ready well and truly for Wave 3 to really kick this off. But I think that's going to be a huge use. I'm excited, obviously, because I want to play it myself. But I think there's a big gap in the market. There are a ton of games that are building. And as we've seen, you cut through the bullshit and it takes 3-4 years to build a game, right? Like it just does. But what a lot of these games do is they sell NFTs as a funding vehicle to build the game. And maybe it's bad if they don't actually launch the game and they have no intention to. But if they do intend to launch the game and they do use that funding to build a really good team, it's fine, right? It's almost like crowdsourcing funds. It's a way, as long as it doesn't affect the balance too much, it's actually okay. But where it gets frustrating for the community member and the investor of these NFTs is they don't have any game to play. There's no use case for these NFTs, and they're dormant. What I think Ethlizards are doing that is super exciting is we step in and we say, you've got a whole bunch of NFTs that you're not really using. Like once you open your Illuvitar disc and you put it into your album and whatever, that's kind of it. So having a place where you can battle someone adds a little bit more exciting element to it. Having another game where one of the ideas that we've thrown out is having a tower defense game. Imagine if you had dormant NFTs sitting in your wallet and you're like, fuck, it's going to be 2-3 years before I can use this character. But what if that was your ticket to this mini game where, yes, it's not going to be as intricate and as AAA as some of these games that you bought into, but it's a really cool mini way for you to start playing using your NFTs without even having the game available. And it's not even from that same publisher. That's where I think that there's this huge gap in the market. And if Ethlizards can build out 4 or 5 of these games, which are considered indie, but can be super addicting, super amounts of fun. Think about like some of the tower defense games inside of Warcraft. Some of them were even more popular than playing the game itself. If Ethlizards can do that, I see a very, very, very bright future for them, and they're definitely on the right path.
That's brilliant. Annie, I know you probably want to give some feedback there as well. I mean, what is your take on that strategy?
Yeah, I think Kieran nailed it. And the real differentiator here for Ethlizards is you could theoretically try something similar in Web 2, but there are no organizations that are incentivized to do so. And in Web3, because Ethlizards is able to position ourselves as a partner for these top-tier game studios, we want to be co-building with them in a collaborative way. Now, all of a sudden, if we can be investing in these studios and we can be co-developing with them, with their assets, sharing their communities across different genres of games and allowing for easier user acquisition, this is an enormous differentiator for these development studios that are partnered with Ethlizards and that are working with us and our other partners, right? We've got pretty strong multipliers outside of just the Ethlizards community with a lot of other groups that we're collaborating with, that we're partnered with, that are not game development studios, but that are other ecosystem and infrastructure groups. And so I think that's really the secret sauce of where Ethlizards has a unique positioning within the sector. We have people that want to build and want to play, as opposed to want to just extract value from all of these projects and then liquidate their assets and head on to the next thing. So that's what gets me really excited every day to get up and continue building in the space. And I think Kieran hit the value prop from a main title standpoint really well. We can add these mini games that maybe Illuvium doesn't want to apply resources to because they're focused on getting that AAA quality game out. We can build something that's more of an indie title, but keeps it interesting for the player base in the meantime.
Brilliant. TSG, last words.
Oh man, I'm just excited. I've been with the Ethlizards since Mint. I'm excited to see what Ethlizards do. I still hold too many lizards, but no, I'm excited to see what the future holds for both Illuvium and Ethlizards. I know with Annie, Kieran at the head of both of these fucking amazing communities, it's gonna be good times.
Dude, give yourself some credit too. I mean, I have to say, Kieran is super blessed to have such amazing team. I mean, you guys are working and you're working from every angle that is possible because you care about the community and you want to make sure that the community knows that you are really building something substantial in Web3, and that's really commendable. So Kieran, hats off to you for an awesome team that you've brought together. And you guys, you have to keep up with what's happening with Ethlizards on Discord, on Twitter. TSG is all over Twitter all day, so be sure you keep up with him. And if you're looking for Kieran, you're just gonna have to go through TSG. There's a few walls, a few doors.
just ping him directly. Flood his DMs.
But guys, we have to wrap it up. This was fun, but that is all the time we have for today. We want to thank our special guest, Kieran, for joining us. It is not easy to get this man to sit here and talk to us and share what he's building, but how amazing it is to see founders and builders be a part of the community and be in the forefront and share what they're building with the community, because Mark Zuckerberg is certainly not doing that. So thank you so much to you. Also, a big shout out to our sponsor and friends at Ethlizards for their continuous support for us. I'm Meta Mona. You can follow me on Metaverse Express alongside my co-host Annie at Animosita and TSG at TSG_7. Thank you for spending your day or evening with us wherever you are. We wish you a wonderful week. Until next time.
See you later.